while the Gambia keeps fingers crossed rather than major preventive measure for the coronavirus. The effects of the disease has been projected to the economic downturn with over 20 confirmed cases in neighboring Senegal. Health authorities in the Gambia held on the campaign in regular personal hygiene and use of toll-free line of 1025 for any suspected case. The National Assembly seems to require more physical efforts to define the country's preparedness, even though border closure and the ban on public gathering doesn't seem to be part of the government agenda in the fight against the disease. The Minister of Health reported on Sunday that over 300 people suspected with the COVID-19 have all tested negative. But the oversight body on national matters has begun special session to decide the way forward to save people in the Gambia. Finance Minister Mamburin Njai was in attendance at the assembly, and he has more in this.
Honorable Speaker, our preliminary assessment of the impact of the COVID-19 suggests that the economic growth in 2020 will be 3% points lower than the initial estimate of 6.3% at the beginning of the year. In terms of revenue performance, it is estimated that close to 1 billion will be lost in revenue for the year, equivalent to 1 month of GRA revenue collection in 2020, if the virus remains uncontained in the next 3 months. The decline in economic growth is estimated to emanate from trade, remittance, construction, hotels, restaurants. In addition, mild effects are anticipated in the manufacturing sector as supply side constrained through the lower supply of production inputs, and other supplies will run low for most factory floors. As global supplies remain constrained due to close down of factories in China, Europe, and Middle East, international trade, taxes, and domestic supply for basic commodities would also experience a short-term adverse shock, thus posing the risk of price hike. Concerning the overall fiscal balance, as close to a month national revenue collection is projected to be lost, and the budget deficit is expected to widen from 1.5 percentage point of GDP as per the approved 2020 budget to 2.1% of GDP with the impact of COVID-19. On the net domestic borrowing, NDP, in the absence of stricter expenditure control and rationalization, the NDP will expand from 1.9 percentage point of GDP to 2.5 percentage of the GDP. As a result, this will reduce the gains and the consolidation of efforts in creating space needed for private sector borrowing to spur growth. Overall, the economic impact of COVID-19 on the Gambian economy is estimated to result in a budget deficit, in a budget financing gap of $2.5 billion. This, coupled with the estimated deterioration in the current account balance, potentially leading to a decline in the international reserve cover, could result to exchange rate depreciation and build up in the inflationary pressures. Finally, in order to mitigate these effects, stricter expenditure control and planning will provide a suitable mechanism to lessen the impact, to ensure that sound economic gains registered in the past 2 years are not equally lost due to COVID-19.
Minister of Finance and Economic Affairs Mamburin Njai, they are speaking before deputies at the National Assembly in Banjul yesterday. Now, I'm glad to say we are joined on the line by Mamadou Sabali, former budget director. Good morning, Mamadou Sabali, and thank you very much for joining us to this program.
Good morning, Team Eyeafrica. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Good to have you on the line this morning. Of course, as you have been hearing, the minister was at the assembly yesterday, and of course, he have talked about the impact that COVID-19 may have on the country's economy. What is your own reading on the statement from the minister yesterday with regards
yes. My first question, I've not been following the assembly, but has the health minister appeared at the assembly yet?
Mm-hmm. Hello?
Yeah, I was just
are you
wondering
asking
whether
back another
the
question?
health minister has appeared at the assembly.
We understand that he's expected at the assembly today.
Well, for me, the health minister should have been there first because it's primarily a health issue.
Okay.
The economic consequences are consequent on the health issues. Granted, but it just shows for me the government and the finance minister are just rushing to attempt to cash in on this pandemic. So it's about making a case. He's not even directly speaking to the assembly, let me tell you that. They're speaking to the international community, because I understand they've already put up a very highly unreasonable budget for this COVID pandemic response. And we know that money is not going to come, just like the 1.7 billion failed to come in the pledges. Having said that, I think it's good that the ministry assesses the potential impact of this coronavirus on our economy. Knowing the level of capacity at the ministry, I don't know how solid their analysis is. Forecasting like a 50% drop in GDP growth, I think that's a bit on the high side. On the budget issue also, I think the numbers they are quoting might be reasonable, but I was a bit attentive to the finance minister's language. I'm quoting him here. He says, on net domestic borrowing, in the absence of stricter expenditure control and rationalization, NDB will expand from 1.59% of GDP to 2.5% of GDP. Now, what he's telling us that is that government may need to borrow more. And you know, this National Assembly has been very strict on them on the past budget session. They don't want government to borrow irrationally. So the finance minister is preparing the assembly that they're going to borrow. But I know whether there was this coronavirus or not, this government was going to borrow because they're spending irresponsibly in terms of the budget. And the language here he used, in the absence of stricter expenditure control and rationalization, borrowing will grow. I mean, for me, that's a sign of irresponsible fiscal governance.
Okay, so Sabali, coming back to the minister's statement, you of course, as you said, the minister seems to have rushed in saying what he has said. But are you suggesting that it's not the right time to do so?
Well, it's a bit too early because this thing is just starting and we still don't have a case in the Gambia. I know there's international impact and we are a small open economy, it's going to affect us. But the speed at which he rushes to the assembly, even before the health minister, that makes it a bit suspect for me. That's my view.
All right. Cognizance of the impact of the pandemic is having globally, like you have mentioned, what alternative do you think the government can take to avert the situation, if there's any?
Well, that's where I was going. I think broadly, like I still have questions about the figures the minister presented, but we have to give them the credit that they at least know that this is going to affect the economy. Now, my point is, if you are saying this is going to affect the economy and borrowing is going to grow, I think the minister should have come up right there with measures that this government is going to take to control and rationalize expenditure, but he didn't give any measures. And like these people are going to go cap in hand and beg for money because of this coronavirus. But, you know, as they say in Wolof, before you go out borrowing, at least show the world that you are also responsible. You are taking precautionary financial measures to make sure that the impact of the pandemic is controlled on the economy.
Yes, exactly. Now, what will you see on your personal level? Probably, what do you think the right measures that could be taken by the minister in containing this or in helping to remedy the situation, as far as the impact
I think,
is
like
concerned?
I said, instead of him coming to tell us in the absence of, to use his own words, in the absence of stricter expenditure control and rationalization, they should just go ahead and control and rationalize expenditure and let the public service and the and the whole country know these are unusual times. We cannot go ahead with business as usual. So that control should be there in the beginning. And I think the government should set aside a budget, because I know the numbers presented in the budget for this year's health issues would not be sufficient with this outbreak. So this is one area where I would gladly support a supplementary appropriation bill to make sure we set aside our own funds for this before we start going to beg.
Well, again, of course, you have mentioned some of the issues here, but specifically also, can you go down the line to touch on the pertinent issues in which you think the minister or the ministry could have, again, done or tell Gambians in the areas of the measures that they want to take or have taken with regards to this issue?
Well, like I said, when it comes to fiscal austerity, you just restrict yourself to the basic necessities. For instance, expenditure on health and health in particular should actually be increased rather than reduced. But where in health are you going to spend? We know that a lot of money is spent in health administration. For instance, health administration costs, which involves their workshops, their per diems, and their fuel and impress. They could cut that and divert those funds to health supplies. For instance, we know that even basic paracetamol is still a problem in this hospital. So let them rationalize within the health ministry to cut down on unnecessary expenditures and redivert them to supplies at the hospital, sanitary equipment, I remember a year or two back, a youth group I am mentoring had to go and buy Omo and donate it to a hospital. For God's sake, Omo should be the last thing that a hospital should lack. Granted, okay, we are in unusual times. Let's forget about all of that. Let's make sure at least we have Omo, basic detergents at these hospitals. Put the staff at the hospitals on overtime and pay them. I'll gladly do that. Stuff like that to make sure that we show our people first, the people being governed, those who are paying their taxes, that of all times in these times, we'll make sure your tax money is most appropriately and efficiently utilized before we start going cap in hand, begging around the world.
All right. Just finally now, since the emergence of coronavirus or COVID-19, cognizance again its impact and the severe it had in the world. Do you think Gambia as a country is on the right track to face the severeness of this virus, that is COVID-19?
I'm sure if you followed, I've started a series of open letters to the president on what to do and what not to do. I think we started very poorly, because when this thing started, President Barrow was campaigning up country. I wrote a letter to him, suspend all your disinauguration, come back home, don't create crowds for us. He went ahead and exhausted all his proper meetings before he did that, but I give him credit that at least now he has stopped. Even though, I can't even give him credit, because after all of that, he brought in another crowd to State House, for God's sake. So the president himself is endangering our lives. I commend them for the travel ban for public officials, and I'm not sure how well they are going to implement it, because you remember last time when they announced a travel ban for the budget, they flouted it and flew around all over the world. At least the health minister, I've seen him briefing people.
Okay.
I have seen people make post commentaries on social media, then in and out of the country at the borders. Some people are impressed at what they are doing there. I commend them for that. But I don't understand, why don't we have a ban on flights coming into this country from affected areas? Yesterday, I saw on social media that Senegal had closed its airspace to certain countries. Their citizens are stranded somewhere, and they're trying to reroute their flights through Gambia. I said, oh my God, I remember when the Ebola thing hit. I was then Secretary General. I was at home at night. I just called to give instructions to Bala Jahumpa, then Minister in charge of communication. He said, close the airspace. We're not going to receive flights from Sierra Leone, and we did that immediately. And by the grace of Allah, we were Ebola free. So Barrow needs to up his game. To be honest, I said, I've seen some positive moves, but it's not enough. He needs to do better.
Yeah, well, you mentioned about the president, and he's expected to give a statement tonight. So, what are you expecting from the president's message?
Oh,
does that sound
I don't
funny,
like to be too hard on my president. Not ask you this question. But since you asked, I'll answer. You should not expect anything original. Copy and paste from what other presidents have been saying, nothing else.
It can be better way to end it there. Thank you so much, Mamadou Sabally, for your time.
Thank you.
All right, that was, of course, former finance budget director. Su ko defee mu ngi noonu Mamadou Sabally dégg nga li mu wax joxe na moom tamit xalaatam ak li nga xamante ne loolu la jàpp loolu la ñu war a taxawee te nag wax na li nga xamante ne lu bëri ci yëf yi ci ministre bi lu mu wax ak yooyu lan mooy si sa jàngat ci li nga xamante ne mooy tey tamit njiiti réew mi ci guddi de war naa gaaral kàddu ci affaire coronavirus bi te dégg nga Sabally lu mu ci wax. waaw.
jërëjëf waaw am na solo leeral lu bëri yaatal na tam Mamadou Sabally. loolu la come on. wax na lu am solo am naa ne daal bu saytu président bi nag comme ni mu la wax rek ñi xaar ba ngoon rek loolu moom passé wul li ci yàlla. waaw ku bëgg a xam lu muy wax dëgg nag moom lu su ma wax loolu dëgg moom nga laaj ko waaye daal nañ xaar daal fii ba juróom-ñetti waxtu si guddi incha allah.